So let's start by talking a little bit as people come in about what a UX mindset is and why Nicole Gallardo here, who's absolutely amazing, Gallardo, is really, really an expert at this incredibly interesting topic. So, Nicole, tell us a little bit about your background and how you got to this concept of a UX mindset.
Sure, sure. Thanks, Alex. Yeah. So I'm Nicole, everyone. I'm unlike most of you, I think, in this room that are joining right now. I actually don't come from a traditional academia background. So I've spent the last 2 decades helping companies of all shapes and sizes, some of the bigger brands I put up here, but across many different industries, grow by solving problems for their users. So with user experience or UX. So I worked in e-com, travel, med tech, baby tech, parent tech, telehealth, like you name it, I've probably designed a product in it. But then 4 years ago, during the pandemic, when I was trying to help my kids do homework and learn online, like many of us were, I saw, I think I'm almost a little ashamed to say I saw for the first time the gap in the usability standards in EdTech during that period. So like the true mama bear that I am, I immediately became relentless about bringing positive change through UX to that industry, to this industry, by approaching like the same old problems with a fresh perspective. So I sort of forced my way into ed tech. I was not really invited to the party, and I just like showed up. But when I got here, I met some really incredible people like Alicia Kwan from UX of EdTech, who I know, Alex, you know, I think she's doing the next webinar, right?
Mhm.
Jessica Millstone from Copperwire Ventures and New York EdTech, Sarah Mondestein from BrainPop, and then of course you, Alex, from EdTech Insiders. But I learned that like all these people share my belief that EdTech products should be held to the same or even higher usability standards as every other industry, right? And what I mean by that is like the products our kids use to learn and that our schools use to operate should be like just as or more intuitive and engaging and user-friendly than the ones that we use to like book travel and shop and work and listen to music, that they should be more important. And then there's one common denominator across all the industries that I've worked with, that I've seen firsthand in tech, that like contributes to a successful product. And that's where this concept of a UX mindset came into play. And I will walk you through a little bit of what that is, and then we'll dive into the strategies. Does that sound good?
That sounds perfect. And I realize I didn't introduce myself either. So let me do that as we get to the next thing. My name is Alex Sarlin. I am the co-founder and head of EdTech Insiders, which is an education technology community. I've also worked with CamBR Education with a whole set of different early stage EdTech companies in our discovery program. So I've worked with Nicole with some of these amazing companies, and she's been incredibly helpful at helping people figure out how to really make their product make sense. That's it. Please do follow EdTech Insiders podcast and newsletter if you don't already. And of course, Founders Who UX. And I'll get out of the way. And Nicole, please take it away.
Great. Okay. Okay. So UX mindset, what is it? I like to think of it simply as it's a way of thinking. So it's how visionaries and leaders in tech give us the products that we love. It's how they build happy teams, how they grow iconic brands. So it's something that has to be learned. It can't be purchased or outsourced to an agency like in company culture. I've seen that it has to really come from within and almost always from the top. So this is why I focus on working with founders and leaders like at Founders Who UX. So approaching business with the UX mindset is kind of like riding a bike. Like once you learn it, it's impossible to lose it. And I really spent my entire career refining like a recipe for cultivating a UX mindset within organizations. So, and I've distilled it down to a set of strategies and activities. And these are the things that I work with founders and leaders with at Founders Who UX. But those are some of the ones that we're going to look at today. Before we do that, first things first, I wanted to level set for any of you in the room who may be new to the idea of UX in general. And the UX can be defined as sort of the tip of the iceberg. I think speaking the right language is an important piece of of building a UX mindset. So UI, sorry, is the tip of the iceberg. It's how a brand can quite literally translate their brand image to the face of its products. So it's design systems, it's logos, colors, fonts. UX, I like to think of it as everything underneath. So good UX is a lot of times it's invisible, it's seamless, and it should be. It's getting users what they need confidently and with delight. So it's kind of like a perfect fitting pair of pants. Like you barely notice that they're there, but you feel really great wearing them. UX is also not development. That's a common misconception across all industries, EdTech and others. It's a separate skill set. In my experience, teams and individuals either specialize in one or the other. So whether they market themselves like that way or not. And why is it important? Why is a UX mindset important for solving problems in EdTech? Simply put, users are people, right? We're complicated, we're messy, we make mistakes. We may be solving problems in education with technology, but at the end of the day, we're solving problems for people. So by approaching problems with the UX mindset, you're really ensuring like humanity remains central to the equation. So EdTech is one industry where the end user is usually not the same as person as the customer. For example, like in e-commerce, I'm shopping for a shirt, I'm the user, but I'm also the customer. In EdTech, a lot of times teachers may use our product or students may use our product, but the admins or the buyers are the ones who might sign the contracts and the checks for it, right? Admins and buyers of your product share the same end users that you do as the founder or the product leader. We both want to make the same people happy at the end of the day. So solving problems with the UX mindset ensures that you're designing for your primary end user first while building that relationship with your customer, right? It's keeping your priorities in order and your resources dedicated to the right things. So I know Alex mentioned this in the very beginning, but in case you just joined, we're going to dive into 5 strategies today on how to solve problems in EdTech with the UX mindset. And I'm going to share, it's going to work like this. We're going to try it. I'm going to share a strategy. We'll talk about how you can apply it, and then we'll do like a mini Q&A session about that strategy before moving on to the next. Okay, the first strategy we're going to talk about is listen to understand. A huge component to UX and developing a UX mindset is empathy. Empathy doesn't come natural to everyone. It's a skill that but it is a skill that we can nurture and we can continue to get better at with practice. So it all starts with how we ask questions and how we listen. Starts with our ears, right? If any of you have studied psychology, you might already know this, but believe it or not, there are different ways to listen. So right now you might be practicing comprehensive listening because you're trying to learn something new. Maybe you're forming an opinion about me or about this topic, and you're coming from a more critical perspective. For most of us, when we talk to people, especially in high stakes conversations, we're more focused on how to respond to what they're saying or how to remember what they're saying than actually understanding what they're saying and why they're saying it. So this is more of like the critical listening corner. I'm guilty of this myself. This is the type I typically find myself in during work conversations. It's human nature. Maybe this is a nice mental break for you at the end, like towards the end of a crazy week, and you're just grateful to be here. You're practicing appreciative listening. But empathetic listening is the only type where you're purely focused on the other person instead of yourself. So you're focused on gaining a deeper understanding of them, their feelings, their concerns, their motivators. It's also the type that might be the most challenging to do. So if you're up to it, if you feel like sharing, I'd love to know like what type of listening are you doing right now? You can drop it in the chat, and it's just like a nice little check-in to see if you understand the differences. And you can be honest. If you're being critical, I won't mind. Okay, so like I mentioned, empathetic listening is not something that you're either good at or you're not. It's a skill that takes time to develop. It takes practice, but it's a very important and crucial soft skill to possess as a leader in EdTech who is trying to solve problems with the UX mindset. So with this mindset strategy, instead of like free flowing conversations with people where our default listening habits might kick in, to ensure we're listening empathetically, we use scripts and question prompts to ensure that the conversation is guided to a deeper level. So with these type of questions, and with having scripts, our only job is then becomes like to pay full attention to what the person is saying and to understand the why, the reasoning behind it. If any of us in here work together in the future, that these scripts are something we'll most likely develop together. In the meantime, this is something you can practice even today, like practice having a conversation and use these questions to sort of dive into a deeper level. So we can pause here. I don't know if there's any questions, Alex, that people are asking about this particular strategy.
No, so far people are mostly just commenting in about how they're listening. But if you want to take a pause here, if anybody wants to ask about how this type of listening is relevant to your work in EdTech, we're all ears, and we'll give it 2 or 3 questions. We're ready to answer. Just drop questions in the Q&A function, and you can use the chat to chat to others. It was closed, but it's open now. So far, so good. We're saying, okay, terrific.
All right.
Let's keep moving. We're going to do this for each one. So please, let's do some, gather your questions. Thank you.
Okay. So the second strategy we're going to talk about today is staying focused on the big problem. So every single element on every single screen of your EdTech product should be considered part of the solution to the main identified problem you're solving for your users. So every single thing should address a real user need, whether it's big or small, toward the big problem. And when I'm working with leadership teams to develop their strategy and research plan, one of the things we spend a lot of time getting right is a list of prioritized user needs that define features. Aligning this list sort of maximizes your investment in product design, and it also ensures everything you're building serves a purpose. So the needs come before the features. This is what can happen if you don't follow that path. Like if you don't stay laser focused on prioritizing user needs before the features, you might start adding features to your product based on like one-off conversations with very particular users, or maybe what you see your competitors doing, or what your users like about another product they're using that solves maybe a very different problem for them. I don't know if we have cat emojis in the chat, but if we do, or throw any type of emoji in the chat. If you currently are or have worked at a company whose goal is to build the next big LMS. I encourage anyone just to throw any emoji. I put cat because that one's more fun. Oh, there is a cat one. Okay. So if there's anyone whose goal is to build the next big LMS. I'm asking this because this is a common scenario in the EdTech space, right? Like I feel like everyone is trying to build the next big one-stop shop. And this not only causes problems in the industry for obvious reasons, but it eventually causes detrimental, sometimes problems within those individual organizations. So, because if we build solutions and products without first defining the purpose or the need of each feature, like according to our long-term vision and our big problem, we either end up with like a huge Frankenstein cat tower that is disconnected from the real user need, the real problem we started with, or maybe these features do address or we are addressing the problem, but our product is just filled with all these costly features that are not bringing any value, and they're just adding clutter and confusion to the experience and overhead and maintenance, right? So both of those scenarios equal wasted resources. I don't know, the cat looks pretty happy in the box to me. Okay, we're going to do an exercise to demonstrate this strategy. These are 5 products in totally different industries that are known as sort of best-in-class experiences. There's Netflix, we have Google Maps, Duolingo, Apple Fitness, and Airbnb. So I thought they mostly did a really good job of ensuring every element on the screen serves a purpose toward their ultimate goal. There's nothing like extra, right? They're solving their users' big problem. So let's first look at Apple Fitness. And I love, like, just to demonstrate this, there's a lot happening on the screen. What purpose, if anyone can throw in the chat, like what purpose do the rings serve? If anyone knows, or if anyone can tell me what these rings serve in the app. So it's a total visual element. Yeah, progress, daily activities, progress tracker. Yeah. So it tells you, it's a quick visual indicator of what my progress is, right? What about the icons next to each workout here? Another very small visual element on the screen. Yeah, activity type. So it's another quick reference. How about Netflix over on the far left? Like what are some of the elements on this screen and their purpose? You can pick your own element and just tell me an element and what the purpose is. What about this TV show filter at the top? What would this do? Categories, yep. You can select different categories. Favorite, personalized, wayfinding. This person likes anime. This person is my daughter. She loves anime, yes. Yeah, okay, yeah, so you can see there's nothing extra, right? Now let's look at Duolingo. The illustrations along the path, they help us follow the steps we need to learn a new language. I can clearly see where I'm going and where I've been. There's a lot of gamification happening here, right? There's a blue bar at the top calling attention to start my work here. I started analyzing Duolingo for this presentation, and I realized that there's one thing that Duolingo can actually work on. I know this is best in class, and this might be a controversial point, but can someone tell me, do you know what every element on the screen represents? Like, does everyone know what every item in the navigational bars represent? We don't, right? Yeah, it's actually becoming a little cluttered, which I was surprised to see. They could use labels, they could simplify. There's some, so I think that there's, as brands grow, as products grow, this is a perfect example of, you need to always check in and make sure, like, is every single thing serving an important purpose toward our big problem? This is an activity you can do with your own team. If you have an existing product, you can take screenshots of it and assess every single feature on the screen, in every screen and every page. Are there any places where you can trim the fat? Like, do you need to refocus on the problem you set out to solve? Or if you're building a brand new product, assess your competitors in this way, and you can identify opportunities or things that you could be doing better than they're doing today. So I'll pause. I don't know if anyone has any specific questions about this particular strategy of staying focused on the big problem.
Well, as people are putting questions in about this one, we do have a couple of questions from the last one that we'd love to hear your answers to, Nicole. One is in terms of that empathetic listening. Can you speak to when you've done this in groups? How do you listen? Do that sort of active empathetic listening if there's a number of people there?
When you're asking specific questions to a larger audience, I think you have to treat, even if you're asking questions to a larger audience, only one person can respond at a time, right? So you do have to take that time to one-on-one dig deeper with that individual respondent, if that makes sense. So there's not a easy way. This is more for one-on-one conversations and connections and discovery with users. So you have to treat it as like you're peeling an onion based on one particular user. You could potentially maybe do like a survey, but I think even a survey, it would be hard to dig deeper into those layers with these questions, unless it was a very qualitative, like sort of free form typed question. But the idea is that you sort of riff off of their answers live, and you dig deeper based on what they're telling you. I hope that helps. Yeah.
Yeah. We have a question about if you're trying to figure out the features that you want, but as you mentioned, the user is different from the purchaser and they have different goals. How might
Mhm.
you, balance the needs of those two different constituencies?
Yeah, this happens all the time. It's like a challenge. So one thing that works, and it's going to be uncomfortable, is you have to force prioritize your users. You have to like prioritize one over the other. For those moments where you need to decide, where it's like decide based on a time crunch or a limited funds, and you need to decide which experience is going to be like more customized or is going to have more focus. Always the end user, my recommendation should be first, should be the end user should be primary. And then you can build onto that. But one strategy that works really well is like staying focused on that end user. If you're just starting out, build the experience very much for them, stay laser focused on them while building like relationships with the customer, and explaining to them how you're solving these problems for their end user, because remember, they share the same end user. And then you can add in features that are for those like secondary and tertiary users.
You share the same end user. I love that. That's such an interesting way to look at it.
Mhm.
One more question here, and then we'll move on. There's a question in the chat about how does empathetic listening when building experience work when you're building experiences for students or children? How do you do that kind of listening for children? And do you have any go-to prompts or ideas about how to talk to kids and get that kind of deep information?
With children, you can use the same, I'm going to go back to that slide. You can use these same prompts for children. One interesting thing about children in UX is that I think a lot of times we try to bucket them into like persona types, and we try to group them into other like-minded children, maybe with similar demographics and things. But with children, I actually don't like doing user personas because their environments are they're not controlled by them. They don't really have any control over their environments, right? So this type of questioning is even more important to do with them one-on-one, to understand the true diversity of needs, of challenges, of fears, of motivators, of all the things that they're dealing with outside of the educational product that you're working on them with. So these are really important. You can use the same list.
And children may appreciate it. People don't often ask them how they feel or why they felt that way, and it could be really eye-opening for them as well.
Exactly. Yeah.
I think we are ready to move to the next strategy.
Okay. Okay. So the next one is called Look Outside the EdTech Bubble. So now that we've talked about assessing our own product and our competitors inside of our bubble, we're going to look outwards. The education industry in general, I think, is known for being in its own bubble of inspiration. For those of us who are designing EdTech products currently, like we know that it's really hard to break outside that bubble. And it's not really until we do that real innovation can take place, because a lot of times the best ideas are the ones that are injected in from the outside, right? This is a theory that you can look back on every major innovation, and it was usually an idea that was injected from something else, and it was reapplied in a totally new context that gave it a totally different meaning. So in order for us to come up with the most innovative solutions for our learning communities, we really need to look beyond our EdTech competitors and our own experiences in the classroom. And we must like constantly be asking ourselves, what are the other industry leaders doing in other areas of tech? This is what can happen if you don't do that. I worked in the cruise industry a lot over the years, and we have a name for this phenomenon that happens. Eventually, I feel like it happens to every industry over time. You think we would learn like in design, hopefully we are learning. I see a little bit of change in some of the industries, but if you do this exercise with any industry, you'll probably get a very similar result. It's called the sea of sameness. This is one quick exercise you can do with your team, is you take screenshots of all your competitors and put them in one large board like this. I even like to remove the logos and ask users or your team, even your team, to quickly find, stand 10 feet away or stand a few steps back and quickly find which brand is theirs, and see. You can also do this before starting a brand new product design. Put all of your competitors in the space on one board and see where the opportunities are to stand out and look different. This is another a way to apply the strategy of looking outside the bubble. This is a screenshot of an actual FigJam board from a workshop I did with the UX of EdTech community. And I really urge everyone to do this with their own teams. It's not only really fun, but it puts people in a totally different mindset, and it just fosters a lot of team building and sparks a lot of ideas. You gather inspiration and best practices from industries outside of EdTech. So the one rule with this exercise is you're not allowed to get any screenshots or ideas from competitors. You have to share screenshots and you look outside into other industries. So I thought we could do a little, start this little mind shift together. And if anyone wants to throw in the chat, just names of, think generally what products do you love or use every day that have nothing to do with EdTech, that are just great experiences or what you consider valuable or best in class. Throw the names of those products, brands, or websites outside of EdTech in the chat. And then we have a nice little list of inspirational places for people to look at. Pinterest, Excalidraw, Libby, these are great ones. Garmin. Yeah, you see these are, and what you can do is we use sticky notes when we do this activity. So because I'm very rigid about colors and meanings and things like that, I use the sticky note, one color sticky note, to write down new ideas that are sparked from this particular product. And then another color sticky note to explain what the screenshot is, what feature stood out from you for it. Okay, so I will pause there for any questions about this particular strategy.
So there's a question, if you're an EdTech person and you're looking for products that you might borrow from, are there particular areas that have some overlap with EdTech that you should look at, or should people look as far away as possible just for completely out of the box ideas?
I don't think they need to look as far away as possible or for overlapping. It's really about the best outcome of this activity has been when people look at what's in their own phones and on their computers. What apps are so valuable to them every day, and assessing why. For example, I think there's Spotify. I have Spotify on my computer and on my phone and in my car, everywhere. In the interface, because I love the interface, I love the recommendations. So some of those things like the interface, why does it work so well for me and so many others? And that can help with a content, content library designs ideas, or maybe the search feature in Pinterest is what is really inspirational. So the search could help with a search in an LMS application, or there's different individual features are what you can focus on. So you're not trying to reinvent the wheel. There's very few things that need to be completely reinvented, but if we can take the best pieces from the best products and across the board and bring them into your EdTech product, then you're truly focusing your resources on solving your EdTech problem, but the features are all best in class, if that makes sense.
Yeah, by feature. And with the UX mindset, you start to notice the features of all the products you use on a daily basis and actually see what's
Exactly.
working, which is really great. We have a question about a really interesting question about um, balancing what you want to do for the user with B2B or enterprise requirements. This person says, how do you incorporate B2B enterprise purchasing requirements? Curious if there are any B2B lessons out from outside of EdTech that might be applicable, because sometimes those requirements conflict with a focus on the end user. So, for example, teachers may want to stay logged in, but security compliance requires logging them out after an hour of inactivity. How might you think about, compromise that that meets requirements but still tries to meet the end user's core needs?
A lot, yeah, a lot of that requirement gathering needs to happen on a consistent basis. Like usually when you involve the business and the security team in that example, or the engineering team, you should be involving them along the design process. It should be one big like agile team so that they're part of the solution. I'm working on a B2B project right now, so this is very like a very relatable question. And the business team I consider them part of the design team. I'm taking their requirements and I'm using that as a base. But if something is extremely like there's a really powerful reason for why it should be debated or at least thought of in a different way, I will design it and present it in the form of like a engaging prototype so they can see that other solutions. But there's a fine line there. And I think that's the job of the UX designer I know it's really hard. It's probably our hardest, hardest part of the job. But if the more you involve business up front, the more that they understand the user as well, which is like the beauty of that format.
Great. Yeah, I love that. Yeah, sadly, B2B requirements transcend logic or user needs. We hear from Soren that I agree. And EdTech is a very regulated space if you're working in schools or universities. One more quick question, Nicole, about what are the best strategies to recruit, research participants, especially if you're doing products for busy families?
Yeah, I feel like this is the golden question. If I had the answer to this, I would be I would be starting a business to do that because it gets asked all the time. I don't know this answer, Alex, to be honest. Like recruiting has been, I know it's one of the most challenging parts of EdTech and designing in EdTech. And it's something in the UX of EdTech community, people are always asking for usability testers and things like that. For the clients that I've worked with, they test within their own network of schools and things like that, which isn't ideal because it might not be as diverse as it needs to be. But that's one strategy that's worked. For brand new products, I would love if anyone has ways, I would love to hear them because that's a question I get a lot. I think a lot of UX practitioners get. Yeah, userinterviews.com could be an option. For children in particular, that one doesn't work, right? So I think that one works for adults. I think it's the recruiting the kids is the harder part.
Yeah, and bribery can work. I mean, offering rewards and can work, but it just, you have to pay exactly. We're seeing you're seeing a theme here. Working with tools or offering rewards is the only thing I've seen that really moves the needle.
Same, yeah, like for all of the usability testing that I've done, it has been through me personally reaching out to teachers and that I know or that I like just have the guts to reach out to or can connect with, and actually offering them, yeah, some sort of reward, a gift card or something like that.
Yeah. I think we're good with questions if we want to keep moving.
Okay. Okay, as a perfect segue into walking in the user's shoes. So this is another strategy to problem solving in EdTech with the UX mindset. So it's when we walk in our user's shoes, we're able to see the big problem through their eyes, right? In the midst of all the uncontrollable, like environmental influences around them. This is a really big part of UX design because it helps us simulate real life, especially in I think this is especially important in EdTech. We want to simulate the classroom or the boardroom or the home, wherever they're learning, or the office. We can walk in our user shoes by practicing things like continuous user discovery, not relying too much on proxies, and one-on-one user connection. Another thought that popped into my head as I was going over this about the last question, a lot of times that doing qualitative research it can be done by like shadowing. So you just have to make it's more manual than other industries that can go to some of these larger banks of user testers, but more the qualitative, like one-on-one user discovery is the way that I've seen mostly done. There's 3 common activities that we do as UX practitioners to help people, teams, and leaders walk in our user shoes. So as leaders in EdTech, it's really important for us to understand the difference of each. A user journey gives us a macro view of a customer or user experience from beginning to end. So it's used to uncover pain points, motivators, emotions, things like that. A user flow is a more zoomed in view of the actions that a user takes, and it's to complete a more specific goal. And then a task flow is focused on very specific and detailed actions the user takes to complete a task. So understanding these 3 things is very fundamental to solving problems with this UX mindset, because I always do one or all of these before I start designing. It's to be done before I launch something that's been designed. So we will do like task flows that to make sure it's validated and make sure it's solving the problem. And I'm not sharing this so everyone needs to like learn how to do these themselves, but it's more about the conversation that you're using this terminology and you're asking your teams and you're checking, did we map out a user journey? What user flows are we creating for this? More like asking for these assets to be created or understanding how your teams are using them today. This is a sample. Here's a sample user journey edit, and I thought we could do a little exercise. So at a glance, even if this may be the very first user journey you've ever seen, at a glance, where do you think the pain points in this product are? Can anyone throw it in the chat? Where should this product team focus their research and design efforts? At which steps? Yeah, they're frustrated and skeptical, right? So this is a really great communication tool. You can see that just at a glance, you can tell, okay, all of these steps in our product, all of these steps in this journey are working, but the ones where we're noticing frustration and skepticism, let's take a look at those and let's put our resources into finding out what's wrong with those steps. As you can see that this is a user journey helps us identify where those pain points lie. Like a lot of times we might hear, oh, the sales are down or customer activation is low. There's a high drop-off rate on this page. And we automatically think we need to redesign the whole page or we need to rethink our whole concept. But really, sometimes most of the time, it's just fine tuning certain pieces of steps. And this is like a way to pinpoint the root of the issue. One way that you can create a user journey within your own product, if you haven't done one before, is by asking a current user to walk you through their process of like step-by-step process of getting a specific goal accomplished. So when it's possible, I would highly recommend you watch them do this task. Like you could do it over Zoom. They could share their screen and you ask them to explain their thoughts out loud. And then you can do this in FigJam, or you can even write it on a piece of paper if you want, whatever is most convenient. but you map out each step. And then the key here is you add the emotion that they felt along with it. And here's where empathetic listening becomes so crucial, because people, especially if they're users that you know, right, that know you or that know the product, maybe they're in your school district, and they're rarely going to say, I'm really stuck here, or this sucks, or this is a bad experience, because people, especially people that are learning or at work or in tech, they don't like to look stuck. They don't like to feel incompetent, like they can't complete something. So it's hard to get those actual words out, but they will get stuck, and they will get frustrated sometimes. And what they do is they'll develop like more inefficient workarounds for bad experiences. And all these frustration points go unnoticed by the team, unless you're trained to like watch for those moments, and unless you're proactively running these sessions where you're capturing the user journey, because sometimes it's split seconds of their hesitation before clicking on something, or a change in their facial expression. And this is where empathy comes into play. This is where those probing questions come into play. For example, like, I noticed you paused there before clicking. Why? Something as simple as that could open up a whole door of challenges that they're facing. Or like, I see you scroll down the page instead of using the filters at the top. What were you thinking then? And you can start digging deeper. So using empathetic listening and observation, you can start identifying some of those areas that are challenging to them. And you don't need to ask for their emotion, right? With a UX mindset, you will empathize with them, and you'll feel it too. Like, you'll feel the emotion. Getting all warm and fuzzy here. So, any questions on this strategy?
We have a question of, when you're working on a product that doesn't exist yet, so you're not yet sure what the flow is, how might you go about mapping the user journey?
Yeah, that's a good question. So if you are working on a product that doesn't exist yet, you would map the physical steps of that person's experience. So if it's something in paperwork, you would shadow them and watch how they do that, their whole flow, or accomplish the same task that you're trying to design a product to help them solve. How do they solve that task today? And you walk through each step. One other way you can take it even further is after you walk through each step with them on how they are completing a specific task, you can put in your proposed solution that your team is working on or thinking of building. You create another user journey with it in place, like imagining in the future, this is how it will work with our solution in place. And your goal would be to turn all those thumbs down where the user is frustrated into thumbs up, right, into positive emotions. Any other questions here, Alex?
There's a comment in the chat about the use of prototypes to do this. If you don't yet have a technical product, would you recommend sort of doing a user journey and prototyping it out in paper or in a lo-fi version?
100%. Yeah. I recommend prototypes always, always, always before building something. This is something I teach it's like the whole point of my course, and every customer client I've always worked with, we always do prototypes before building anything. And we always validate those prototypes with usability tests and like mapping out a user journey in some form or another. But yes, always prototypes. And nowadays, in case anyone isn't familiar with Figma, but designers can build prototypes like extremely fast, and it costs zero development time. There's no development cost, and you can catch problems very quickly without spending any resources on rework.
That's a great point. I think we can move on to the next strategy.
Okay. Okay, So the next strategy is called unmask assumptions. This strategy is sometimes a little bit controversial when I work with, especially with founders, I think. But once the concept is grasped, it's always extremely valuable, and I always get thanked a lot for sort of pushing through that educational period. So assumptions are everything we think we know about our users, our product, and our market that is not validated by like hard data and research. So one important factor in building an EdTech product that stands the test of time, right, is validating our own assumptions early on about the problem we're solving and the people who have it. If we're in a very early stage startup, we have to have assumptions at the beginning, right? That's where we're testing. Maybe we haven't found product market fit yet. We have to have assumptions to build something off of. But a big but here, we must be aware of what those assumptions are. We must identify them and forget that they're only assumptions. They're not facts. Decisions later on that are based on incorrect assumptions can have really serious consequences. Like teams need to be aware of their collective assumptions by documenting them and then creating action plans to turning them into data over time. So what are there any assumptions, like what are some of the common assumptions, and you could throw them in the chat, that leaders in EdTech or designers in EdTech may have about their users? What are some of the common ones? Does anyone want to share, or can anyone think of any? I think of like, yeah, teachers should be replaced, the type of device end users have, or even just like, yeah, the access to any type of technology, right? Reliable internet. Yeah, as much data as possible. I think a big one I hear a lot is, or even I'm guilty of myself in the beginning before I ground myself, is like that users who are learning are like assumed to be self-motivated, right? That we're going to seek out help when we need it, and we're going to take the initiative. That's sometimes an assumption. Literacy, yeah, these are all good ones. Workday, yep, okay. Yeah, time management is a huge one, that teachers have the time, or students have the time, or I have 2 teenage sons, like that they're actually going to take the time to use the product appropriately is another big one. Yeah, okay. So because who doesn't love a good visual, and especially one that reminds us of pasta, here's an exercise you can do to help you see what assumptions your team currently has, if you're not sure like where you are. So what first step is listing out everything you know about your users, your product market fit, your product, your market, your industry, your competitors. You can throw it in like a Fig Jam board, Google Docs, whatever your team uses. Everything you're using to base your design and your EdTech product off of. Then put it through a strainer by physically linking each piece of knowledge to a real live piece of data that backs it up. So it has to be something significant, like published. Think more quantitative data versus qualitative. Like it has to be more than just a few pieces of user feedback. Add links and screenshots of analytics and add it to the board. And what will happen is you will start to see that your facts come out of the strainer. So everything that is validated, everything that has the research that makes it through the strainer are your facts. Those are things that you know and that are very low risk, and that you should really start your problem solving here, or you can feel good about making decisions based on those pieces of information. Anything left behind in the strainer, those need to be validated by data. Those are your assumptions. Those are high risk. That's what there's a reason why 1 out of, I don't know if this is an accurate number and in this very moment still, but 1 out of 10 startups don't make it, is because a lot of their products are built on these assumptions. You've already, just by doing this exercise, you've already made huge strides in leading with the UX mindset, just by identifying and putting them into buckets. It's more about like, just so your team knows, if we make any major decisions based on the guys up here, that's going to be high risk. So if for any of you that consult with me after this webinar, we'll go through exercises together to help you do this exercise in a most efficient way. But this is a good starting point, and change from what we know to what we think we know. Any questions here about this strategy?
I'll kick it off as people are putting them in. One thing that I find interesting about EdTech is sometimes entire EdTech products are like based on assumptions that, you know, people want to learn this way or teachers want this kind of solution. If somebody's testing their just basic idea for a startup, you know, if they do this exercise and realize, oh, everything's an assumption so far, what would you recommend they do to start validating?
It's that's where prototypes really come into handy. If you can't validate based on research that's already existing, like if there aren't any big studies that have been done to validate some of those things that you think you know, then it's high. You have to just be aware this is high risk. So maybe think twice before injecting a ton of money into these sort of situations and products. And you need to really use your prototyping, which is low cost and no code prototyping in Figma, to test and spend a lot of your resources on testing and you're doing usability testing with people in your demographic, because you're going to have to rely on the validation from those actual users versus like published studies that are already known in the industry. So your prototyping and your usability testing becomes what you base your idea on, and you just have to know that it's high risk. And then when you start getting the funding, then you can conduct more of the big quantitative studies to feel more secure about those decisions and to put more money into them.
We have a question about if you find a feature of your product or some portion of your product has failed, it's just not meeting the user needs, and you're trying to redesign it, but you don't have a huge amount of resources to do so. You're trying to keep costs low. Are there ways to sort of reuse as much as possible, but try to fix exactly, you know, how do you sort of pinpoint the minimum amount of work that is needed to make something better?
That would be done through, I think, a combination of maybe all of these strategies in a way. So I would start first with the journey mapping to understand, okay, this is the area, this is the feature that there's an issue with, or this is the problem. And then you could conduct usability tests with, you don't need a large group of, if you're a smaller company with fewer resources, you can conduct usability tests with, you know, a handful of people, 5 people, and on just that specific feature and watch them use it and use those probing questions to see what's most challenging about it. And then you can identify those very specific parts that need to be reworked. Okay. I'm gonna go. Okay, so I would jump to the summary. Just to summarize what we've went over today, to recap our 5 strategies. So listen to understand, remember, practice those conversations, carry around those probing questions with you, focus on the big problem. Remember that every element in your product should be helping in some way to solve that big problem that you set out to solve originally. Look outside of EdTech for inspiration and best practices, and really encourage your team to start that collaborative board, FigJam board for this. Walk in your user shoes with creating those user journeys, unmasking assumptions, or that if you can differentiate assumptions from facts within your organization, that's already a huge step. And then just aim to validate those like over time. But just remember that for a growing EdTech company to truly embody a human-centric ethos, like a UX mindset, must be cultivated internally, right? And it's embraced as sort of a guiding set of principles. Your guiding principles should be customized and are not going to look the same as your competitors, but they should be embraced and they should be like set by every member of your organization. And it should start from the leaders, from all of you in this room. So we have a few moments left. I hope you all found something of great value today. Like if any of you need help making your EdTech product more user-friendly, or you want to talk more about UX mindset, or you just want to like nerd out about UX, I'm always open for questions or conversations. I'll drop my info in the chat, Alex, for anyone who wants to reach out. I don't know, we have some time for 5 minutes for questions. If anyone has more.
There's an interesting comment about AI designed UX options. And you mentioned how Figma and other tools make it faster and cheaper to create prototypes than ever before. Do you anticipate that AI will make it even faster and cheaper, and we'll be able to do different variations and things like that on your products?
I think so. I hope so. I mean, I'm in an optimistic mindset about AI. I use it when I can. With design, it's tricky because we want to stay true to the connection. We need to stay connected to the users, and we need to make sure there are no biases. There's all the big worries that I think everyone in education has, the same worries we have in the design industry. But I think the more we get ahead of it, and the more, like, I'm always trying to stay on top of tools that are out there. If anyone has any good tools to share, design tools, please share them in the chat. I'd love to check them out. Yeah.
There are starting to be some really interesting ones, and even within tools like Figma, if you do all your post-its and things, they have AI to summarize it and sort of put it into text and things like that, which can be really useful. Somebody's shouting out Canva in
Yeah.
the chat too. We have a question just from the very beginning, and I think this is a really good question. Can you talk a little bit more about the relationship between UX and UI? So understanding the underlying the big part of the glacier, how does that translate into interface decisions?
Yeah, they play together. They're like two peas in a pod. So you have to have good UI for your UX to be well used, and you have to have good UX for the UI to be well like interpreted. So the tricky part about UI and UX is and this is there's no like studies, I haven't read about this, but my own personal experiences is that designers usually specialize in one or the other. They're usually like a little bit better at UX or a little bit better at UI. And I think that's a really important question. Like if you're building your team, to ask them which one they prefer, because even if you can only afford one designer, it's helpful to know which is their strong suit, because then when you can bring on your next one, you can, flip the gap or fill that gap with someone who is a good counterpart. But there's sort of like a blurry line in between, but I like to think of UX as kind of like the man behind the curtain. Like it's like the mess behind the scenes that nobody sees, all the chaos and research and craziness, and UI is how to display it in the most user-friendly way.
Yeah, I think of like the stuff happening in the kitchen, everybody trying to figure out what to do, and then it sort of comes out, and everything's very polished and pretty, and the interface is very clean, ideally. That's great. Well, people really enjoyed the webinar. Super helpful, applicable strategies. I think we're getting on right. It's 1:59, so I think we're about out of time here. Thanks so much for being here. Nicole, I just feel very zen when I listen to you. I bet other people feel that as well. I think you have a very calming effect because it's this UX mindset just gets you out of your stress and into sort of understanding other people's perspectives. It's really powerful. Thank you everyone for being here. Please follow up with Nicole. So zen, yeah, right. The follow up with Nicole, she is really amazing, and has worked in many different industries. So it's so fantastic for her to be supporting the ed tech industry, which, as she said, still has a lot of to learn about UX and UI, unfortunately. But we're getting there. Uh, Thank you so much for being here. Nicole, would you like to wrap us up?
Yeah, no, thank you all for being here. I threw my contact info in the chat, and yeah, if anyone has any extra questions or want to like ask or didn't want to bring it up in the larger group, feel free to reach out. I'll put my info in one more time on LinkedIn too. And yeah, no, I thank you so much, Alex. This was great, and so excited to be a part of this, and look forward to doing more in the future. Yeah.
Yes, and as Nicole mentioned, this is the first in a series of UX in EdTech webinars, free webinars, and we will be working with Alicia Kwan, who is the founder of, the UX of EdTech. So she's
Yeah.
specifically thinks about that world, which is great.
I
So we're looking forward to seeing, many of you there as well. Keep an eye out for those announcements.
Yeah, I highly encourage you all to listen to Alicia. She is just a genius in this space, and yeah, if you liked this talk, you're gonna love hers.
Question about recording be available afterwards. Yes, the recording will be available afterwards. So we will make sure that it is sent out to everyone who has registered for the podcast. Screaming babies, we've been there. We know, we got it. Thanks so much, everybody, for being here with us. We'll see you soon.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
Bye.